Hello, welcome to Sex Talk with Natasha. It's Wednesday night, 10 p.m. And tonight we've got a great question, which I think has some underlying questions under the question. We'll see. We'll see what the what the guest has to say about it. But we're going to be talking a little bit about what some of the motivations might be to consider non-monogamy in your relationships, and in particular, the way that the question was asked was, am I interested in non-monogamy because of prior, damage? So I'm not sure what damage entails. So I'm curious to get talking to our guest. But I have a few ideas about that first. But I just want to encourage anybody who's been part of Sex Talk with Natasha, or maybe this is your first time, to just look into what we're about a little bit. So my main goal here is adult comprehensive education and adult sexual shaming healing. Is that a thing? Should we put that on a bump? Adult shaming healing, sexual shaming healing, which I think a lot of us come from a lot of that, given our backgrounds in American culture, in many religious cultures, a lot of our legal issues in our governments, that how they deal with sexuality. So there's just a lot of sexual brokenness that I have come across in my practice. And so Sex Talk with Natasha is kind of an ongoing experience. It's supposed to be something you tune into on a weekly, even daily basis. Most of the time we have something daily going on at Sex Talk with Natasha on the Patreon page. So whether it's a daily action or a blog post or a live kind of event like we're doing tonight, there's a community page where you can actually ask me questions directly or interact with other patrons and subscribers to share ideas and thoughts. And there's also a way that you can email me directly through being a subscriber. So there's lots of access that you get to me for a very affordable rate. And I'm hoping that some of you will consider becoming subscribers tonight, because the more I can keep it affordable, the more people who subscribe. And I think it'll be a more rich community in that sense as well. So Ashley Puccini is my producer, and I'm going to let her take it away for a few thoughts, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining. We're really happy to have you all here. Just for those of you that are new to Sex Talk with Natasha, every Wednesday night at this time, we do an hour-long episode where we have a guest come on and ask Natasha a question. Tonight we have a great guest. It's a great topic. And so the program is an hour, and we split it up into a couple different segments. The first 20 minutes, Natasha's going to give us a little bit of education on the topic. And then the next 20 minutes, we're going to bring on our guest. And our guest and Natasha will go back and forth. And then the last 20 minutes, we like to leave it open to you all. So please send us your questions. I'll go ahead and read them, so you can totally be anonymous. You can send us an email, sextalkwithnatasha@gmail.com. You can DM us on Facebook, Patreon. We're all over the social medias. And then just for everybody to know, the first half is free on Facebook. We want you guys to have access to this. For those that want the entire episode, we have the full episode on Patreon. So just head over there and become a subscriber over there. And it's just patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. And like Natasha said, we have some great resources over there. And if anybody is interested in seeing Natasha professionally, you can always check her out on her online practice at Symmetry Solutions. You can just go to symmetrysouls.com. So thank you everybody for joining, and we're excited to have you here. And I'm going to pass it over to Natasha.
All right. Thanks, Ashley. I appreciate that. All right. So tonight's topic is, I'm kind of rethinking monogamy, just from a little bit of the bullet points that I want to make, but I'm not exactly sure if I'm hitting on the bullet points that my guest is interested in. So I'm probably going to go to my guest sooner than normal tonight, just so you're prepared, Trevor, for me. But I think that we live, so the stats are that currently all industrialized nations in the world are primarily monogamous cultures. And what I mean by that is that most people find themselves in monogamous long-term relationships, and that's kind of considered the cultural norm. And so along with that, we also have a lot of patterns and beliefs and legalities that go along with that, as far as how our governments are set up. And when there's been studies done just on what the ideas are around monogamy versus non-monogamy, it comes back from a high percentage of people, so we're talking like 70 to 80% of people consider monogamous relationships in a long-term type setting, whether that's marriage or long-term live-ins, etc., as the healthier, better choice. Now, that's not necessarily the case for everybody when you actually kind of dig in deeper as far as what we consider healthy, or how do we define healthy, better? These are all kind of objective terms, or subjective terms, but that's kind of how people perceive it. And so, of course, a lot of people are still very interested in entering into long-term exclusive monogamous relationships. So that gets me to my next point, which is, well, so we all have like really good intentions, and when they survey people who are like newly married or about to get married, or probably like in the first year or two after marriage, you get a lot of ideas or a lot of feedback saying that, of course, I'm not going to, be unfaithful. There's not going to be issues in that regard. Of course, I trust my partner. And this is true in spite of that at the same time, when they're surveying kind of the same demographic of newlyweds or fairly, like 2 to 3 years into the relationship and right before marriage, most people do report having had some type of either infidelity in past relationships, or also ideas about being attracted to other people, flirtations. A lot of those kinds of things are things that they report experiencing. So we have this kind of expectation and I guess intentions, and then we have kind of the reality of what people are experiencing. And so I'm going to just share a few statistics that the numbers, depending on the study, differ, but it seems like about 30% of marriages are going to have one partner who at some point was unfaithful. And the numbers differ a little bit between men and women, so that right now it's about 20 to 25% of men will report having cheated on a significant other, and about 15% of women report that. However, the 15% number of women has gone up like twofold or threefold just in the last like several decades. And so some of the ideas around that are that women are becoming more financially independent, have more just kind of are more empowered in their own personal decisions, etc. So we have some of those things. And if anybody is really interested in kind of diving into more infidelity type information, I always recommend Esther Perel's work. She's really kind of up and coming right now. She has a new book out called The State of Affairs, and she has some excellent TED Talks. Two in particular that I would recommend are Mating in Captivity and Rethinking Infidelity. So what I mainly want to say about this is the expectations of exclusivity are very high in monogamous cultures, and yet the realities are that many, many people struggle with betrayals or infidelities, or just even an idea of what exclusivity means. My next point then that I want to make is that marriages in of themselves have gone through a lot of expectation changes. Marriages and long-term relationships have gone through a lot of expectation changes just in the last, I would say, like 5 to 6 decades. So where marriage used to be kind of more of a contract that really provided a lot of financial stability or physiological safety, or kind of agreements between family or community systems, we've really moved into marriage and long-term relationships being much more about personal fulfillment, self-esteem, like this is somebody who's supposed to build me up and help me out and do better in life and meet my needs and love me. And so all of these kind of romantic expectations that we place on long-term relationships, that's quite different from kind of the history of marriage as, the human race has known it throughout, millennia. So what happens is that expectations increase over time, which means that potential of those expectations being met are kind of making the rewardedness of relationships go down. So people feel less content or satisfied in long-term relationships, although really how long-term relationships are working in our current culture is that they're much more, I guess what we'd considered, meeting each other's needs and all of that much more so than ever before. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic that's going on. And that has a lot to do with just our expectations. So a lot of things that I hear is I didn't sign up for that. I didn't expect this kind of problem with you. We're incompatible. And then add to that is that we're also living longer than, ever before. We're having more medical technology, making our quality of life better for longer periods of time. So now you have potentially, many, many decades with somebody that, you possibly partnered with in your early 20s, or even mid to late 20s, but by the time you're in your 80s and 90s, you've had a lot of time to go through a lot of different problems and sadness and struggles and things of that nature. So the other thing that's also interesting just under this point is that although expectations have increased, investment of time and resources have not. So, a lot of people want a lot out of their marriage, but they're not necessarily investing a lot in it. So again, the expectations are this should just kind of naturally happen. If we were really soulmates and lovers, and if we were really meant to be with one another, these things would just kind of organically happen. And so we get busy in our lives, as I'm sure many of you can relate. We've got work, we've got kids, we've got extended family pressures, we've got community responsibilities, so many different things. We're going in so many different directions. And oftentimes our significant partner is we're kind of going along with the ride. We're not necessarily prioritizing retreats or vacations or time to, just have 20 minutes together every evening. Or and some couples are good at that. And actually they're the ones that actually report higher levels of contentment, but most of us are not necessarily super great at that as far as the research is concerned. So what I want to get to is what the question from the guest screams to me is, how many people are drawn to non-monogamy because either their expectations of monogamous relationships haven't gone as they had expected or hoped, or they've kind of given up, like, well, nobody's ever going to be faithful, or I'm not going to be able to meet anybody who meets all of my needs, or I'm not going to meet anybody who is not going to betray me or hurt me in some way. So why don't I just go ahead with this particular outlook, which is the non-monogamous approach. And so what I would say to that question, just very briefly, is I'm not sure we have the type of research where we can pinpoint exactly why people either explore or end up living non-monogamous lifestyles completely, like, oh, this is 30% of people who do that, it's because of this particular thing. However, I do think that there is something to the dissatisfaction of unmet expectations in monogamy that can lead to that. There can also be lots of other reasons that have nothing to do with that would be a reason why people are interested in non-monogamy. So that's a fairly shorter maybe version of my bulleted point, but because I really do want to get into what in particular the guest meant by past betrayals, or maybe past baggage, or what his concerns are about why he might be interested in this particular lifestyle. And I may have missed the boat altogether, so I guess we'll just find out. So Ashley, I'll give it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor, for joining us. You should be unmuted now. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Cool.
All right. So hi, Trevor.
Hi, Natasha.
All right. So why don't you give us a little bit of background just to set the stage, whatever you're comfortable sharing as far as your situation and what you're thinking through.
So this is Teddy.
Hi, Teddy.
He's my wingman.
Aww.
He's taking a nap. So I'm 38, and I have 3 sons from my first marriage, and they're 13, 11, and 10. And they live with me during the school year. They live with their mom during the summer. And we live not close to each other. And I remarried in 2012. And my second wife walked out on our marriage and, her stepkids about 90 days ago. And she's kind of been 1 foot in, 1 foot out for a couple of years. And anyways, I mean, she finally pulled the plug, and I've been in therapy and, and that's going really well. And, I feel like, my mental health is in a good state right now. But so anyways, I made a decision at, a point after this happened to try and get myself back out there. And one of the commitments that I made to myself very early on was that, based on, my background of, having been raised a Mormon, I tend to rush into things, you know what I mean? And I tend to, lead with emotion. And then, the second, the sex gets involved, it makes it even more complicated. And it, well, I mean, it makes it easy for me, right? Oh, I'm in love. Oh, there's sex involved. And so I made a decision that I was not going to have an exclusive relationship with anybody because of how fresh off the boat I was from this second divorce. I never anticipated getting divorced the first time, let alone a second time. I was left both times. And I wanted to, to do some self-discovery and kind of figure out what my damage was and how to prevent things like that from happening again. But at the same time, I recognized the emotional need for some companionship in my life. So I put myself out there on some dating sites, and I've lost a lot of weight. Over the past year, I've lost like 100 pounds. And so like, I've got some decent self-confidence going on, and stuff's going well for me in my life. And so I'm getting dates and things are going well. And I try and disclaimer to everybody that I'm seeing, like, hey, like, I'm not really willing to be exclusive. Like, that's not going to be my bag. Like, I'm still, going through this divorce. Like, she left me 90 days ago. Like, I technically can't be involved in anything officially. I'm still married. But beyond that, like, I'm not really willing to fall in love because, like, I don't trust myself to not screw that up right now, and to not hurt myself, and to not hurt, my partner. And so I'd like to, yes, I'm interested in dating. And, yes, I'm interested in the possibility of, a relationship, but I'm not willing to be exclusive with anybody because, my therapist and I came up with an analogy of like eggs in a basket. Like, a lot of my relationship eggs that I have to put in other people's baskets are broken. And my own basket has a pretty big hole in it. People want to put eggs in it, they're just going to fall out. So that's kind of the analogy that I've used with the people that I've gotten serious with. And anyways, long story short, I have found myself in a position where I was at one point, like, seriously dating 3 women, and I had integrity that I like to believe that I have in my life. I tried to be forthcoming and, fully disclose that to each of them, what was going on, and have really hard conversations about that, which are not fun, pretty awkward to have. And then, there was a point where it became clear that it was not going to romantically work out between me and one of them. And so it became the 2 of them. And the 2 of them kind of tribed up and started having communication independent of me. And that blew my mind. And all kinds of new stuff going on in my life that I've never experienced before. And then, you know, I'm an idiot and I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing. Am I allowed to say that on? Sorry, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
I don't know. Down. You're definitely allowed to have all kinds of emotion and righteous anger, whatever you want to have with me. But I don't know.
I don't know.
Sorry.
We haven't been blocked since yet,
Okay.
so hopefully, just you know.
I don't know. We can pretend I said heck. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, except trying to be a good person and a good dad, and be the kind of partner that I would want, you know, somebody to reciprocate back to me, while also embracing that I'm not really ready to be in an exclusive relationship with somebody.
Right.
And
so
I understand that hurts, like the people that I'm involved with.
That sounds like it's been kind of the main problem, is that the people that you've been involved with are not necessarily okay with the idea that you're not wanting to become exclusive at this particular time of your life. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think it's been one of those like, okay, well, we can continue seeing each other in spite of you being that way, Trevor. Do you know what I mean? Like they understand it and it's disclosed and it's out there and I'm transparent about it and they get that, yeah, he's dating other people. And it, you know, it even gets to the point, you know, where it's like, all right, well, I need it to be something less abstract than he's dating other people. I need more information on this. And okay, cool. Like, what do you want to know? And, but yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think in large part it comes down to, this is, you know, they didn't come into the dating scene looking to get into, you know, a polyamorous relationship or an open relationship. And to be frank, I didn't either. Like
it doesn't sound like maybe that's where you'll even end up long term, but it sounds like, I mean, there's a season, right? And a lot of what you're talking about right now is a certain type of season that you're going through in your life. I mean, you've been through a very traumatic event, and you have children that you need to consider. Yep. And so actually, I think in most of the mental health kind of field, I think there would be a consensus that taking it slow and not jumping into an exclusive relationship or rushing into something very serious is probably the wise thing to do.
Ding, ding. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, because and you know, you mentioned growing up Mormon and how that has played a role in the past. And usually how I see that playing a role, and sometimes for people, is that because maybe they don't want to have sex outside of an exclusive relationship or outside of a marital commitment, then they jump. I mean, I see people remarrying oftentimes as soon as, you know, 6 to 9 months after divorce, which seems very hurried, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. Yeah, I remarried within 8 months after my divorce was final.
Right.
To like the second woman that showed any type of interest in me whatsoever.
Right. Like, so
totally,
you're balancing a lot of stuff, right? You're balancing kind of this idea of self-care. You're balancing this idea of self-work, right? So how do I work on myself? Now, I'm not a proponent. I don't like it when we say, well, you need to work on yourself first before you get into a relationship, because I often say I don't know anybody who's on an island working on themselves and not having any relationships. Like we're all in relationship with one another, whether that's a romantic relationship or even friendship relationships or family relationships. So we can't completely step away from our relationships. But I do think that there's some wisdom in this idea that, you know, I do need to give myself time to heal. I need to give myself time to figure out what my role maybe was in some of these relationships. And not just kind of, you know, soothe the pain and the grief by filling that in with another person, which oftentimes, if you don't do that type of self-work, we see people kind of attracting the same type of person with the same type of issues because you're part of that attraction cycle. Does that make sense? So
absolutely. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're doing some good work around that. So before we move on to just for Patreon subscribers, can you tell me what, because you've given me a lot of good history. I like where you're headed. I support your decisions from the perspective of taking the time, and it's unfortunate. So I think one of the things that happens oftentimes in the dating world is that sure, okay, yeah, sure, you're going through a divorce, and sure, it's not exclusive, but at some point, a lot of people, again, because we live in this monogamous type of culture, expect it to become exclusive. And for some people, that's like within a month. For some people, that's within a year, right? For some people, it's within who knows how long. And so again, those mismatched expectations. And unfortunately, I think I'm probably digging into some deep water here, but one of the things that I think happens is that because we live in a monogamous, privileged culture, people who don't want to make that exclusive commitment, whether it's the man who's usually seen as non-committal, or the woman who's usually seen as flaky or bitchy, or something like a man tease, people on both genders get very stereotyped in very negative ways, because you're not doing the healthy thing to be willing to be exclusive, when in reality, being exclusive at particular points of your life might actually be the most unhealthy thing that you can do, which is what you're kind of describing. So before we go off, can you shoot me a question or two that you want me to make sure that I cover tonight?
I mean, I have a therapist. So I mean, I guess the question, I'm just interested in your perspective based on your background and our having previously crossed paths, and my knowledge of who you are as a person and your values and your sex positive outlook on things. So that's really why I'm excited to be here. So yeah, I mean, I kind of want to take it back to like the fundamental there. Like, I mean, like the original question of, how much of me telling myself that, hey, I shouldn't be, getting involved in an exclusive relationship, I shouldn't be getting too serious, is, how much of me wanting to date more than one woman is me just using that as a license to kill? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, because I feel like that's where the moral and ethical conflict potentially lies inside of me. Like at what point does it cross the line from me trying to protect my heart, you know what I mean, and put myself back together and be careful with myself and proceed with caution, over into I'm a player and I'm trying to, I'm just trying to chase tail, you know what I mean? And I'm trying to get away with it and have a legitimate excuse, to be able to do that, and disregard the feelings of people that, that I'm leaving, in the wake of my my selfish decisions. Does that make sense? I mean, I know that that's a long-winded, not very simple question, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. I hope that I've conveyed
well. That's super interesting. And again, I have to bring up the gender perspective on this, because I think I would have a woman telling me a lot of the same things you're telling me, but she probably wouldn't be telling me, I'm concerned that I'll be chasing tail. She would say something along the lines of, I'm concerned that I'm being used, or allowing myself to be used. And so I want to just point that out, because I think one of the things that we all need to really sexually heal from is this enemy status between men and women. That men are a particular way, that men are only interested in sex and getting tail and getting laid, or whatever these terms are, and women are the gatekeepers, and
or having threesomes. I just got to add that in there, like dating two chicks at the same time, three chicks, like it's like, yeah, it's this fixation.
Right. And even with that, we seem to, like if a man has two women, then that can be seen as like, oh, he's a player. But if a woman is with two men, it's like, wow, she's empowered, right? And so again, it's interesting how a lot of these things, when you put on the gender lens, you'd say, if this was a woman talking to me right now, how would the conversation possibly be different? If this was a man talking to me, how would the conversation possibly be different? I think that's an important thing that we should all be thinking about. What I want to continue to talk about, which is when we take it off of Facebook Live here in a minute, is that you've presented a lot of what I call the principles of sexual health. You know, when you say, when you're dating and you're saying, I'm not ready to be in an exclusive relationship, that's you being honest. Honesty is one of the principles of sexual health. And so if a woman or a man says to you, well, that's fine, I'm fine with that, and then yet comes back to you 3 weeks later or a month later with that not having been fine, then they weren't being honest with either themselves or you. And so that's not necessarily on you. And I think that that's where the conversations go awry, and why people, but then we tend to villainize the person who's non-exclusive versus the person who is wanting to be monogamous. Because even if it was the person who was wanting to be monogamous who wasn't honest, well, but you're the one that's not fitting in the cultural norm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got dumped last night by one of the two women that I've been dating, and I mean, I absolutely need to take responsibility for stuff that, like for poor choices that I've made in the relationship. And there's things that they brought up, both of them. We had a we had a meeting of the three of us, but and
well, let's go into that after
Sure.
we say goodbye to Facebook. But what I'll say about that is it's okay for somebody to say, what I thought I was okay with, right? You not being exclusive with me, I thought I was okay with that, a month ago. And I've come to realize through my own experience and living with that, if you're not ready to move into an exclusive relationship, well, I can still respect that. You were honest with me about that from the beginning, but I no longer am comfortable in that.
Yeah, things evolve, feelings evolve. Absolutely.
But for somebody to somehow shame you or say, well, what's wrong with you? We've been together 3 more weeks. Why aren't you ready to be exclusive? That's very different. That's manipulation, not necessarily recontracting. Okay, so there, I'll say goodbye to Facebook Live, I think. Ashley, right? Are we on that?
Yes, that's perfect. You're great. Thank you, Facebook, for joining.
All right, so we're going to say goodbye to Facebook, but we're going to continue this conversation because there's so many different things that I'd love to talk to you about that are so interesting in this case.